I have emails here. Fake environmental report.
Who's liable? Fraud! Fraud! Verified?
The HOA fined me $8,500 for unauthorized wildlife habitat and demanded I remove every native plant from my property within 14 days. The new HOA president, a woman I'll call Pesticide Patty, stood on my lawn screaming that my pollinator garden was an insect invasion risk, threatening property values. She had no idea her entire case was built on fabricated environmental reports. She never thought I'd actually call her bluff and do exactly what she demanded. So I did. I ripped out every native plant as requested and watched their million-dollar neighborhood become an ecological dead zone. When a bully hands you the perfect weapon to destroy them, are you supposed to just walk away? My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 67 years old, and I'm a retired environmental biologist who spent 35 years working for the National Park Service in Colorado. After my husband died in 2019, I sold our house in Denver and moved to Boulder Creek Estates in Longmont, a quiet neighborhood that seemed perfect for retirement. I bought my property in October 2020 when the development was still mostly empty lots and the HOA was just a formality on paper. My half-acre sits on the western edge of the subdivision, backing up to a natural wetland that's been protected by the state since 1987. The first thing I did after moving in was convert my entire yard into a native plant habitat. Not random wildflowers, a carefully designed ecosystem using species native to Colorado's Front Range, Rocky Mountain bee plant, prairie coneflower, blanket flower, blue grama grass, and butterfly milkweed. I installed a small pond fed by rainwater runoff that attracted chorus frogs and dragonflies. I built brush piles from fallen branches that provided shelter for cottontail rabbits and ground-nesting birds. Within 2 years, my property had transformed from bland suburban lawn into a thriving wildlife corridor connecting the protected wetland to the foothills. I documented everything meticulously, as any good scientist would. I photographed each plant with its Latin name and ecological function. I kept a wildlife journal noting every species I observed: mountain bluebirds, painted lady butterflies, fence lizards, red foxes passing through at dawn. I even published a paper in the Colorado Native Plant Society Journal about creating residential wildlife habitats in suburban developments. My garden became locally famous. The Boulder County Extension Office used it as a demonstration site, and school groups visited regularly to learn about native ecosystems. The problem started in March 2024 when Patricia Holloway moved into one of the new McMansions 3 houses down. Patricia was 52, a former pharmaceutical sales rep who'd made a fortune during the opioid boom and retired to Colorado to give back to the community. What she actually wanted was control. Within 2 months of moving in, she'd gotten herself elected HOA president on a platform of restoring neighborhood standards and protecting property values. Around the local coffee shops, people just called her Pesticide Patty because her first official act was mandating quarterly professional lawn treatments for every property, chemicals only, organic alternatives, not acceptable. I first met Patricia on a Tuesday morning in May, when I was photographing a nest of morning cloak butterflies on my milkweed. I heard the clicking of expensive heels on my flagstone path and turned to see a woman in white linen pants and a coral blazer navigating my garden like she was walking through a minefield, her face twisted in exaggerated disgust. "You must be the biologist," she announced without introducing herself. "I'm Patricia Holloway, HOA president. We need to discuss your property's impact on our community standards." I stood up, brushing soil from my gardening gloves. "Nice to meet you. Is there a problem?" Patricia gestured broadly at my garden, at the swaying native grasses, at the pond reflecting afternoon sun, at the small brush pile providing shelter for wrens. "All of this is a problem. The weeds, the standing water, the piles of debris. Our covenants require maintained lawns and professional landscaping. This looks like an abandoned lot. These aren't weeds," I said carefully. They're native Colorado species. The pond is a rainwater harvesting system, and those aren't debris piles, they're habitat structures for ground-dwelling birds. Patricia pulled a leather portfolio from her designer bag with theatrical precision. According to our updated covenants, all landscaping must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I don't see any application from you. I moved in before the covenants were updated, I explained. My landscaping was installed in 2020 and 2021 before the new rules existed. I'm grandfathered in. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Grandfathered or not, you're creating a nuisance. I've received multiple complaints about insects from your property invading neighboring yards. Bees, butterflies, who knows what else. It's a health hazard. Bees and butterflies aren't hazards, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. They're essential pollinators. Every plant in this garden is native to Colorado. They belong here more than we do. Patricia snapped her portfolio shut. Miss Chen, I'm trying to be reasonable, but if you won't cooperate voluntarily, I'll have no choice but to take formal action. Our community has standards, and everyone needs to follow them, even environmental activists. She walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking accusingly on the stones, leaving me standing in my garden with a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. The first letter arrived 1 week later. It came in a cream-colored envelope with Boulder Creek Estates HOA embossed in gold script, the kind of unnecessary luxury that screamed insecurity. Inside was a formal violation notice citing Section 7.3b of the HOA covenants. Unauthorized vegetation creating insect attraction nuisance. The fine was $2,500, with an additional $500 per week until the violation was corrected. Attached were photos, aerial shots from a drone showing my entire property from above, my garden looking wild and unkempt compared to the chemical-perfect lawns surrounding it. The letter demanded I remove all non-compliant vegetation, eliminate standing water, and restore my yard to neighborhood-appropriate landscaping within 30 days. It was signed by Patricia with a flourish and notarized with an official gold seal like she was serving a court order. I read it twice, my hands shaking with anger, trying to understand how anyone could look at a healthy ecosystem and see only violation. My first instinct was to comply, not with her demands, but with reason. I believed in education, in showing people the science. Surely, if Patricia understood what I'd created, she'd withdraw her complaint. I spent 2 days preparing a response. I printed out my publication from the Colorado Native Plant Society Journal. I compiled letters from the Boulder County Extension Office praising my habitat as a demonstration site. I included a list of every species in my garden with citations proving they were native to the Front Range. I added photographs showing the butterflies, birds, and beneficial insects that depended on these plants. Finally, I attached a copy of my deed showing I'd purchased the property in October 2020 before the current covenants existed, along with Colorado Statute 38 to 33.3 to 106, which protected pre-existing landscaping from retroactive covenant enforcement. I sent everything via certified mail and waited, confident that facts and law would prevail. I was wrong. The response came 4 days later, and it hit like a punch to the gut. Ms. Chen, it read, "The documents you provided are irrelevant. Our environmental assessment indicates your property poses a documented health and safety risk to neighboring residents due to excessive insect populations and potential standing water disease vectors. You remain in violation." That phrase, environmental assessment, stopped me cold. What assessment? I'd never seen any county inspector, any environmental consultant, any official of any kind. I looked closer at the letter. Clipped to the back was a single page titled Environmental Impact Report, Chen Property, 4,823 Wetland View Drive. It was dated 3 weeks earlier, before Patricia had even visited my garden. The report claimed my property showed excessive mosquito breeding habitat, uncontrolled pollinator invasion risk, and visual blight reducing neighborhood property values by estimated 8-12%. At the bottom was a signature above the typed name, Dr. Marcus Pemberton, PhD, environmental science consultant. I'd never heard of him. A quick search on the Colorado Department of Public Health website found nothing. The Colorado Secretary of State Business Database had no listing for any environmental consulting firm under his name. This Marcus Pemberton either didn't exist or wasn't licensed to conduct environmental assessments in Colorado. The report was a fabrication. My exhaustion turned to cold fury. This wasn't about landscaping standards or community aesthetics. This was a coordinated attack using falsified documents to force me into compliance. Patricia Holloway didn't want my garden improved, she wanted it destroyed, and she was manufacturing fake science to justify it. That night, my grandson Tyler called. He's 28, works in tech, and handles the social media for several environmental nonprofits. I told him everything. "Grandma," he said after a long silence, "you need to see something." He sent me a link to the Boulder Creek Estates neighborhood Facebook group. The post was from an anonymous account created that same day. It showed drone footage of my property set to ominous music, captioned, "Insect infestation threatening our homes. When will the HOA protect us?" The comments were vicious. People I'd never met were calling me a hoarder, a health hazard, a property value destroyer. One person claimed my mosquitoes had given their child West Nile virus impossible. Colorado hadn't had a West Nile case in Boulder County in 3 years. Another demanded the HOA take legal action before someone gets seriously hurt. The misinformation campaign was working. Patricia had turned my entire neighborhood against me using lies, fake science, and social media fear-mongering. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the forged environmental report, feeling the weight of 35 years in environmental science pressing down on me. I'd spent my career fighting for ecosystems, teaching people about the interconnected web of life, showing them how human and natural systems could coexist. And now a pharmaceutical sales rep with a laminated HOA card was using fake science to destroy what I'd built. The anger I felt wasn't hot, it was the cold, calculated fury of someone who knew exactly how the system worked and exactly how to use it. Patricia wanted to play with environmental regulations? Fine. I'd show her what real environmental science looked like. The next morning, I started building my case. Not defensively, offensively. I wasn't going to prove my garden was legal. I was going to prove their entire subdivision was violating environmental law, and Patricia's fake report was the smoking gun that would bring it all down. First, I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Public Health requesting an investigation into Marcus Pemberton for practicing environmental consulting without proper credentials. I attached Patricia's forged report as evidence. Then, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with Boulder County for all environmental assessments conducted on properties in Boulder Creek Estates in the past 5 years. If Pemberton's report was real, it would be on file. If it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't, its absence would prove forgery. Next, I called my former colleague, Dr. Sarah Whitmore, who now directed the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. I sent her photos of my garden and Patricia's violation notice. Sarah's response came within an hour. "Margaret, you've created critical habitat for 3 species of concern in Boulder County: the morning cloak butterfly, the Preble's meadow jumping mouse, your brush piles, and the boreal chorus frog, your pond. Under Colorado Statute 332105, any action to destroy documented habitat for species of concern without state wildlife approval is illegal. If they force you to remove this, they're breaking state law." That was the ammunition I needed. But I wanted more. I wanted Patricia to understand exactly what she was demanding. I contacted Tyler again. "I need documentation. Video, photos, timestamps, everything." "What are you planning, Grandma?" Tyler asked. I could hear the concern in his voice mixed with something else anticipation. "Malicious compliance," I said simply. "She wants me to remove every native plant. I'm going to do exactly what she asks, and I'm going to make sure everyone sees what happens when you destroy an ecosystem based on fake science and real arrogance." Tyler arrived the next day with camera equipment that looked more expensive than my first car. He spent a week documenting my garden from every angle, time-lapse videos of butterflies feeding, slow-motion footage of hummingbirds visiting Columbine, close-ups of bee colonies and the prairie flowers. He recorded bird songs, interviewed the Boulder County Extension agent about the garden's educational value, and even captured footage of a red fox family using my brush pile as a den site for their kits. The final video was 20 minutes long, professionally edited with species identifications, ecological explanations, and Sarah's statement about species of concern habitat. But Tyler didn't stop there. He created a second video showing the rest of Boulder Creek estates, the chemical-perfect lawns devoid of any insects, the ornamental trees that provided zero food for wildlife, the decorative landscaping imported from nurseries using plants from China and Europe. He interviewed neighbors, faces blurred, who admitted they never saw butterflies or birds anymore. One elderly man who'd lived in Longmont for 50 years said, "Used to be, you'd see monarchs migrating through here every fall, hundreds of them. Haven't seen one in this neighborhood in 3 years. Not since they put in all these houses." The contrast was devastating. My garden was an island of life in a desert of suburban sterility, and Patricia Holloway wanted to eliminate the last refuge. While Tyler worked on documentation, I took a different approach. I mailed a certified letter to the Boulder Creek HOA board, all 7 members, not just Patricia. I attached my credentials: PhD in environmental biology, 35 years with National Park Service, Sarah Whitmore's letter about species of concern, habitat, and the Colorado statute protecting that habitat. I explained calmly and professionally that removing my garden would constitute illegal destruction of protected wildlife habitat, and any board member who voted to enforce that removal could face personal liability. I sent copies to the HOA's property management company and to their insurance carrier. 4 days later, I got a response, but not from Patricia. It was from Gerald Moss, a board member I'd never heard from before. "Miss Chen," he wrote, "I want you to know that not everyone on this board agrees with President Holloway's actions. Several of us are deeply concerned about the environmental report she's using and the legal implications of forcing habitat removal. However, Patricia controls the board majority and refuses to withdraw the violation. I'm sorry. Please document everything." That was the warning I needed. Patricia wasn't going to back down, even when faced with facts, law, and common sense. She'd built her identity around this crusade, and admitting error would shatter the authority she'd constructed. So she was going to double down, no matter the cost. The cost was about to get very high. The second violation notice arrived exactly 30 days after the first. This one increased the fine to $8,500 total and added a new demand: immediate removal of all unauthorized vegetation within 14 days, or the HOA would enter my property, remove everything at my expense, and place a lien on my house for costs plus legal fees. It was the nuclear option. Patricia had decided that if I wouldn't comply voluntarily, she'd use the HOA's power to physically destroy my garden. The letter included a new document, an emergency abatement authorization signed by Patricia and 2 board members, claiming my property posed an imminent health hazard requiring immediate remediation. It was all lies. No health hazard existed. No emergency was present. But the document had the force of legal authority behind it, and Patricia clearly believed I'd fold rather than fight. She couldn't have been more wrong. I spent 2 days preparing. First, I printed copies of every piece of evidence I'd collected: the forged environmental report with Pemberton's fake signature, Sarah's letter about protected species, Colorado statutes protecting habitat and pre-existing landscaping, Gerald's email admitting board concerns, and Tyler's documentation showing what my garden actually contained. I compiled it all into a thick binder labeled Boulder Creek HOA Violations of Environmental Law. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and necessary. I wrote a letter of compliance. Not fighting compliance, not conditional compliance, but absolute compliance. Dear Boulder Creek HOA Board, it began, "I am in receipt of your demand dated September 14th, 2024, requiring removal of all native vegetation from my property at 4,823 Wetland View Drive. Though I believe this demand violates Colorado environmental statutes and will result in destruction of protected wildlife habitat, I am complying under duress to avoid further legal action. All vegetation removal will be documented, and the HOA will be held solely responsible for all environmental consequences of this action. I attached a copy to Patricia's violation notice and my documentation binder. I sent everything certified mail to the HOA, to Gerald Moss personally, to the Colorado Department of Wildlife, to the Boulder County Environmental Health Department, and to my lawyer, a former colleague's daughter who specialized in environmental law. I wasn't just complying, I was creating a paper trail that would bury Patricia when this was over. The final step was the hardest. I called a local landscaping company, not one of Patricia's chemical lawn services, but a small outfit owned by a former Forest Service ranger named Mike Torres. I showed him the violation notice and my garden. Mike walked the property for an hour, photographing plants, identifying species, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. Finally, he sat on my porch steps and said, "Ma'am, you understand what removing all this will do?" "Yes," I said, quietly. "It'll eliminate the only wildlife corridor connecting the wetland to the foothills. Every bird, butterfly, bee, and beneficial insect using this as a migration stop will have nowhere to go. The chorus frogs will lose their breeding pond. The butterfly larvae in the milkweed will die. The fox kits in the brush pile will lose their den. And every plant I remove is a native species that belongs here, being replaced by, what? Concrete? Kentucky bluegrass? Chinese ornamentals?" Mike nodded slowly. "And the rest of the neighborhood?" "Chemical desert," I said. "Once my garden is gone, there's nothing left. No native plants, no pollinators, no functional ecosystem. Just a subdivision that looks pretty and contributes nothing to the environment." "You're going to do it anyway?" Mike asked. I met his eyes. "I'm going to do exactly what they demanded. And I'm going to document every second of it. Because sometimes the only way to teach people what they're destroying is to let them destroy it and make sure everyone knows who gave the order." Mike pulled out his phone. "Then you'll need better documentation than just photos. I know a guy at CU Boulder who does ecological impact studies. If you're going to destroy a functional ecosystem on someone else's orders, we should document what's being lost." He made a call. Within 2 hours, a young graduate student named Jennifer Park arrived with scientific equipment that looked like it belonged in a lab, not a suburban garden. For 3 days, Jennifer conducted a full ecological survey of my property. She counted plant species, 47 native varieties, measured biodiversity index significantly higher than any other property in the subdivision, documented insect populations, 1,200 plus individual observations across 80 species, and recorded bird usage, 23 species using the garden for feeding or nesting. Her final report was a masterpiece of scientific documentation. It concluded, "The Chen property represents the only functioning native ecosystem within Boulder Creek Estates. Removal of this habitat will eliminate critical migration corridors, breeding sites, and food sources for numerous species, including 3 species of concern in Boulder County. The environmental impact of this removal will be severe, irreversible, and entirely preventable." She signed it, stamped it with CU Boulder's official seal, and handed me 3 copies. One for your records, one for your lawyer, and one for whoever ordered this destruction. Make sure they know what they're destroying. Tyler set up cameras, not hidden surveillance, obvious, professional documentation. He mounted GoPros on stakes at each corner of my property, positioned his main camera on a tripod for wide shots, and wore a body camera to capture close-ups. He wasn't hiding what we were doing. He was making sure everyone knew this destruction was happening because Patricia Holloway demanded it. The work began on a Saturday morning, the first day after my compliance deadline. Mike Torres arrived with his crew at 7 a.m. I'd posted notices on every entrance to my property. Vegetation removal in progress, required by Boulder Creek HOA under threat of legal action, all destruction documented, contact Patricia Holloway, HOA president, with questions. The notices included Patricia's phone number and email address. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. Neighbors I'd never met were calling to ask what was happening. I gave the same answer every time. The HOA president ordered me to remove all native vegetation under threat of fines and legal action. I'm complying with her demands. If you have concerns about this, please contact her directly. By noon, Patricia's phone was apparently ringing off the hook. I know because she showed up at my property absolutely furious, screaming before she was even out of her car. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, marching across my lawn in designer sandals, completely inappropriate for a work site. "You're supposed to be cleaning this up, not making a spectacle." I was standing next to Mike, watching his crew carefully excavate the pond's native plants for relocation to a friend's property. Tyler's camera was rolling. I turned to Patricia calmly. "I'm doing exactly what you demanded. Your violation notice required removal of all native vegetation. That's what we're doing. Everything is being documented as you requested in your emergency abatement authorization." Patricia's face went red. "I meant for you to replace this with proper landscaping, grass, professional design." "Your notice didn't specify replacement landscaping," I said, pulling out my copy of her letter. "It only demanded removal. I'm complying with the exact language of your order. If you wanted something different, you should have specified it." "This is ridiculous." Patricia sputtered. "You're deliberately misinterpreting. I'm following your written instructions precisely." I interrupted. "Every action being taken is in direct response to your demands. If you have concerns about the outcome, perhaps you should have considered the consequences before issuing the order." Patricia looked around at the cameras, at Mike's crew, at the neighbors who'd started gathering on the sidewalk to watch. She realized, too late, that this was a trap she'd walked into with her eyes open. She demanded destruction, and now she was getting exactly what she'd asked for. She couldn't withdraw the order without admitting she'd been wrong, and she couldn't stop the work without violating her own authority. She spun around and stormed back to her car, shouting over her shoulder, "This isn't over! The board will hear about this!" "I'm sure they will," I called after her. "I'm sending them daily updates." The work continued for 5 days. Mike's crew was respectful, careful, almost reverent as they removed each plant. They relocated what they could to the protected wetland, where at least some species would survive. But most of the garden simply ceased to exist. The prairie grass is gone, the milkweed that hosted monarch caterpillars removed, the columbine that fed hummingbirds eliminated, the brush piles that sheltered wrens and fox kits hauled away, the pond where chorus frogs sang every spring filled in with topsoil. By day 3, the transformation was stark. My half-acre of thriving ecosystem had been reduced to bare dirt. No insects buzzed in the air, no birds sang from branches that were no longer there. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of machinery removing the last traces of life from soil that had briefly remembered what it was supposed to be. Tyler documented everything. The before and after shots were devastating. The time-lapse video showed life being systematically erased, biodiversity replaced by sterile nothingness. But the most powerful footage came from his interviews with neighbors. "I used to love sitting on my deck watching the butterflies from her garden," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "My kids would count the different species. Now, there's nothing." An elderly man shook his head sadly. "I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Colorado my whole life. That garden was the only place in this neighborhood where things felt real. Now it's just another boring subdivision." Even Patricia's supporters started expressing doubts. "I thought we were just making her clean up," one board member admitted off camera. "I didn't realize we were destroying an entire ecosystem. This doesn't feel right." On day 5, the work was complete. My property was a blank slate of exposed topsoil, absolutely featureless except for the survey stakes marking the property lines. It looked like a construction site, not a yard. Mike Torres walked the perimeter one last time, then came to shake my hand. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I've done a lot of landscaping work, but this is the first time I've been paid to make something worse. It's not your fault," I told him. "You did exactly what was needed. This is what she wanted. Now she gets to own it." The immediate aftermath was chaos. The neighbors who'd gathered to watch initially, curious or hostile, were shocked into silence by the scale of destruction. Social media exploded. Tyler posted his 20-minute documentary on YouTube with the title, "What Happens When HOAs Destroy Protected Wildlife Habitat." Within 48 hours, it had 500,000 views. The comments were brutal, almost all directed at Patricia and the HOA. Environmental groups picked up the story. The Colorado Native Plant Society issued a statement condemning the removal. The Boulder County Audubon Society organized a peaceful protest at the next HOA meeting, holding signs that said, "HOAs kill wildlife" and "Butterflies don't vote but we do." But the real consequences started when the wind came. Colorado's Front Range is famous for its wind-sustained gales that roar down from the mountains, especially in spring and fall. With native prairie grasses, those winds are manageable. The deep root systems hold soil in place. Without those roots, the soil has nothing to anchor it. 3 days after my garden was removed, Boulder County experienced sustained winds of 40-50 miles per hour. My property, now just exposed topsoil, turned into a dust bowl. Massive clouds of fine dirt lifted off my land and blew directly into Boulder Creek Estates. It covered everything: cars, windows, pools, patios. The residents who'd been so eager to eliminate my weeds were now frantically trying to clean dust out of their homes while more kept blowing in. The chemical-perfect lawns that Patricia was so proud of were coated in a layer of my topsoil, but the dust was just the beginning. The larger consequence came a week later when Boulder County got its first significant rainfall of the season, 2.5 inches in 24 hours. Typical autumn storm. With my native garden in place, that rain would have been absorbed by deep-rooted plants, filtered into the ground, and slowly released into the wetland through natural channels. Without the garden, the rain hit bare dirt and had nowhere to go except downhill, fast. Within an hour of the storm starting, a small river of muddy water was flowing off my property, carrying topsoil with it. It hit the storm drains at the bottom of the hill drains that had never been designed to handle that much sediment-loaded runoff. The drains clogged almost immediately. With nowhere else to go, the water spread across the street, creating a muddy lake that stretched across 6 properties, including Patricia's. Her pristine lawn was underwater. Her decorative landscaping was half buried in sediment. Her attached garage, built slightly below street grade for aesthetic reasons, filled with 6 inches of muddy water that destroyed her Mercedes and ruined thousands of dollars of stored belongings. She wasn't the only one. 4 other houses at the bottom of the hill experienced flooding. 2 had water in their basements. 1 had a retaining wall collapse from the saturation. The total damage across Boulder Creek Estates exceeded $200,000, and the entire disaster was captured on camera. Tyler's time-lapse showed the exact sequence: rain hitting my bare property, water sheeting downhill, storm drains overflowing, flooding spreading across the neighborhood. The cause and effect relationship was undeniable and devastating. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Patricia, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "You did this deliberately. You destroyed your property knowing it would flood us." I took a slow sip of my coffee, looking out at my bare dirt lot. "Patricia, I did exactly what you demanded. Your violation notice required removal of all native vegetation. I complied. The flooding is a natural consequence of removing the ecosystem that managed water on this property." "You should have known this would happen," she screamed. "You're a biologist. This is malicious." "I did know," I said calmly. "I told you in multiple letters that my garden was a functional ecosystem, managing water, supporting wildlife, and preventing erosion. You dismissed all of that as irrelevant. You demanded removal anyway." I complied. If you wanted different results, you should have listened to the science instead of relying on forged environmental reports." There was dead silence on the other end. Then, "What forged reports?" "The report from Marcus Pemberton," I said. "The environmental consultant who doesn't exist. The report you used to justify your violation notice. I've filed complaints with the Colorado Department of Public Health and provided copies to the County District Attorney's Office. They're investigating document forgery and fraud." Patricia hung up without another word. But the battle was far from over. It was just beginning. The county arrived Tuesday morning, not just inspectors, but engineers, environmental specialists, and someone from the district attorney's office. They walked my property with instruments I didn't recognize, taking measurements, soil samples, and photographs. Then they walked the flooded neighborhood, documenting damage, reviewing storm drain capacity, and interviewing residents. The senior engineer, a woman named Diane Cooper, came to my porch when they were finished. "Miss Chen, I've reviewed your property history and the HOA's violation notices. I want to be clear about something. You've done nothing wrong. Your original garden was functioning exactly as it should, managing water, preventing erosion, supporting biodiversity. Removing it created the flooding problem." "I know," I said. "But the HOA demanded removal under threat of legal action." I complied. Diane nodded grimly. "That's what concerns us. The HOA forced you to destroy a functional stormwater management system based on a fabricated environmental report. That's not just bad policy, it may be criminal negligence. We're recommending the DA investigate fraud charges against whoever created that report." She handed me a thick document. "This is the county's official findings. Your property is now classified as high erosion risk and must be remediated with appropriate vegetation within 90 days. We're also recommending the county require all properties in Boulder Creek Estates to install rain gardens and native buffer strips because the current landscaping provides zero stormwater management. The cost for that will fall on the HOA." I looked at the document, then at my bare property. "And who pays for my remediation?" "Technically, you do," Diane said, "but we're prepared to testify that the HOA's actions directly caused this situation. If you sue for damages, the county will support your claim." The emergency HOA meeting was called for Thursday night. I wasn't invited, I still wasn't a member, but Tyler attended as a guest of Gerald Moss, the board member who'd warned me. He live-streamed the entire meeting on Facebook. The community clubhouse was packed with angry residents, their homes still drying out from the flood. Patricia stood at the front, clipboard clutched like a shield, trying to maintain control of a meeting that was already spinning into chaos. "Order! I call this meeting to order," she shouted over the din. "We're here to discuss the recent flooding event." "The flooding you caused," someone shouted from the back, "by forcing her to destroy her garden." Another voice chimed in. "I lost $15,000 of belongings. My insurance won't cover it because they're calling it preventable. Who's paying for that?" Patricia tried to rally. "The county determined that Miss Chen's property was the source because you made her remove all her plants," Gerald Moss interrupted, standing up. "I have emails here where several board members, including myself, warned you that removing native vegetation would cause erosion and flooding problems. You ignored us. You pushed through the violation notice anyway, using a fake environmental report. Now we're all paying for your arrogance." The room erupted. Residents started shouting questions all at once. "Who approved the environmental report? Why wasn't it verified? Who's liable for the damages?" Patricia tried to respond, but her voice was drowned out. Finally, someone from the back yelled, "I move to remove Patricia Holloway as president and dissolve this board pending a full investigation." Second came from multiple voices. The vote was overwhelming. 47-3. Patricia Holloway was no longer HOA president. She'd lost everything. She'd built her authority, her reputation, her control, all because she'd forced the destruction of something she didn't understand and never tried to learn about. The legal fallout was swift and comprehensive. The Colorado Attorney General's office filed charges against the fake environmental consultant firm, Turns out Marcus Pemberton was actually Patricia's cousin, a real estate appraiser with zero environmental credentials. He'd written the report as a favor, copying language from actual environmental assessments he'd found online. Both he and Patricia were charged with fraud, forgery, and falsifying official documents. Patricia took a plea deal. 18 months probation, $50,000 fine, community service with an environmental nonprofit, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. The civil lawsuit was even more devastating. I sued the Boulder Creek HOA for $250,000 in damages, cost of garden removal, cost of erosion remediation, property value reduction, emotional distress, and lost opportunity costs. My lawyer subpoenaed all HOA records and discovered Patricia had used HOA funds to commission the fake report, hire the drone operator for surveillance, and pay for the Facebook smear campaign. The HOA's insurance company refused to cover any of it, citing fraud exclusion clauses. The settlement took 8 months, but was worth it. The HOA paid me $175,000 and agreed to establish a native landscaping protection bylaw preventing future boards from requiring removal of ecologically functional gardens. But the best consequence came from Boulder County. The flooding had forced them to reevaluate stormwater management across all Front Range subdivisions. They passed a new ordinance requiring every HOA to maintain a minimum percentage of native vegetation on common areas and prohibiting enforcement actions against homeowners with certified wildlife habitat gardens. They called it the Chen Ordinance, and environmental groups across Colorado started using it as a template for other counties. My garden became a case study in what not to destroy. Rebuilding took 2 years. Mike Torres helped me redesign the space using the same native species, but with enhanced erosion control features the county required. Tyler documented the entire restoration process, creating a companion video to his destruction documentary. Watching life return was like watching time-lapse footage of spring, first the grasses, then the wildflowers, then the insects, then the birds. The butterflies came back. The frogs returned to the reconstructed pond. A new fox family made a den in the rebuilt brush pile. One morning, I was photographing a western swallowtail butterfly on my blanket flower when I heard footsteps on my path. I turned, expecting Tyler or Mike, and found Gerald Moss standing there looking uncomfortable. "Miss Chen," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize on behalf of the board, the old board, for what happened. We should have stopped Patricia earlier. We knew what she was doing was wrong, but we were too afraid to stand up to her." I studied him for a moment. "Why didn't you?" Gerald sighed. "Because she was so certain. So confident. She made us believe that authority and confidence were the same thing. By the time we realized she was wrong, she'd already done too much damage." "What changed?" I asked. "You did," he said simply. "You showed us that sometimes the only way to expose a bad decision is to implement it exactly as ordered and let everyone see the consequences. You could have fought her in court for years. Instead, you let her destroy something beautiful, documented what was lost, and made absolutely sure everyone knew who gave the order. It was brilliant, and it was devastating." Patricia destroyed herself by getting exactly what she demanded. He gestured to my restored garden. "This, what you've rebuilt, it's better than before, stronger. And the county ordinance means no one can destroy it again." I walked him around the garden, showing him the new species I'd added, explaining the enhanced erosion control, pointing out the birds and butterflies that had returned. By the end, Gerald was smiling. "We'd like to hire you," he said, "as a consultant, to help us redesign the common areas with native plantings. After everything that happened, the new board wants Boulder Creek Estates to be a model for sustainable suburban development. We want to do what you did here, but across the whole neighborhood." I thought about Patricia, about her demand for chemical-perfect lawns and imported ornamentals, about her belief that control and conformity were more important than ecological function, about how her arrogance had destroyed something precious and taught everyone finally what they were losing. "I'll do it," I said. on one condition. Every resident gets education about why we're using native plants, not just they're pretty, real science. Ecosystem function, biodiversity, climate resilience. If people understand what they have, they'll protect it. Gerald nodded. Deal. The transformation of Boulder Creek Estates took 3 years. Slowly, systematically, we replaced sterile lawns with native meadows. Chemical monocultures gave way to diverse plant communities. Stormwater ditches became rain gardens bursting with wildflowers, and gradually, life returned. Butterflies migrated through again. Birds nested in newly planted shrubs. The chorus frogs singing spread beyond my pond into the common areas. People who'd moved here for the perfect suburban aesthetic found themselves falling in love with something messier, wilder, more real. Children who'd never seen a monarch butterfly started keeping migration journals. The homeowner who'd claimed my mosquitoes gave his kid West Nile became a passionate advocate for native plants after watching hummingbirds nest in his yard for the first time. And Patricia? She moved to Arizona 6 months after her probation ended, presumably to find another community that would appreciate her particular brand of authoritarian aesthetics. I heard she tried to run for HOA president there too. She didn't win. On my 70th birthday, Tyler threw a party in my garden. Not just family, the whole neighborhood came. Someone had made a banner that said, "Thank you for teaching us what matters." Gerald gave a speech about how the property values Patricia had been so worried about protecting had actually increased since we'd implemented native landscaping throughout the development. Turns out people would pay a premium to live in a community that prioritized ecology over ego. But the best gift came from the Boulder County School District. They'd created a new environmental science curriculum based on my garden, Tyler's documentaries, and the Chen Ordinance. They called it Suburban Ecology, Building Resilient Communities. The teacher's guide included a case study titled, "What Happens When We Ignore Science?" It told the story of a retired biologist, an HOA president armed with fake reports and real arrogance, and a garden that had to be destroyed to teach everyone what it was worth. As the party wound down and the sun set over the foothills, I stood in my restored garden listening to the evening chorus of frogs and crickets. I thought about Patricia's first visit, her disgust at my weeds, her certainty that conformity was more important than biodiversity. I thought about the fake report, the violation notices, the threats. I thought about watching everything I'd built be systematically destroyed because someone with authority decided beauty mattered more than function. And I thought about the simple, devastating power of doing exactly what you're told. Patricia demanded removal of my native plants. I removed them. She wanted me to prove they weren't necessary. I proved it by showing what happened when they were gone. She tried to destroy my credibility with fake science. I buried her under real science. She wielded her clipboard like a weapon. I turned her own written orders into evidence that destroyed her. Sometimes the best response to a bully isn't resistance, it's compliance. Absolute, documented, unavoidable compliance that ensures everyone sees exactly what the bully demanded and exactly what it cost. Patricia Holloway gave me an order, thinking I had no choice but to obey. She was right, I had no choice. But she forgot that obedience doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes obedience is the sharpest blade you can wield, especially when you document every cut. The garden grows strong now, protected by law and surrounded by a community that finally understands what it means. The butterflies return every year. The frogs sing every spring. And somewhere in Arizona, Patricia Holloway is probably measuring someone's grass height with a tape measure, absolutely certain of her authority, never realizing that authority without wisdom is just arrogance waiting to implode. I hope she never learns that lesson, because some people need to destroy something beautiful to understand what they've lost. And I'll be here in my garden, surrounded by life that refused to stay gone, teaching anyone who'll listen that ecosystems are resilient, science matters more than authority, and sometimes the best revenge is giving a bully exactly what they demanded and making sure everyone remembers who asked for it.